Hey everyone, and welcome to my April wrap-up. I've got through quite a few books this month, so I'm gonna just jump into it because, yeah, there's about 9 books or so that I read in April. I'm also going to give each book a star rating this time, if I remember. So it'll be a star rating out of 5 for every book, and I'm also going to tell you my sort of book of the month, so the best book that I read in the month that was. So the first book that I read was Charlotte Street by Danny Wallace. It's the first novel that I've read of Danny Wallace's. I've read some of his non-fiction books before and they're really funny, so I saw this in the charity shop recently and I thought, yeah, why not, let's try it. So it is quite schmaltzy. I read this over Easter, over a couple of days basically. I raced through it because it is funny, it's very pacey. It is a little bit sugary because it's about a guy who finds he basically helps a woman with her shopping one day into a taxi cab. He realises that he's held on to this disposable camera, or she's forgotten the disposable camera, and he goes and develops the photographs and then decides to track her down. So he sort of becomes obsessed with tracking her down. And, I think the humour just pulls it back from being too sugary sometimes. And it's not usually the sort of thing that I would read, sort of like a bit of a rom-com type thing, but it is really funny and I do recommend it. Danny Wallace is just hilarious, and yeah, if you want a bit of fun and you'll whiz through it, then read this. I've given it a 4-star rating because it just made me smile a lot, and yeah, I just found it really fun. So yeah, it gets 4 stars. So the next book I read is A Place Called Perfect by Helena Dugan. So this was a Waterstones Book of the Month last year in 2017 when it was published, and it's Helena Dugan's first novel. Basically it's about this girl called Violet who moves to a town called Perfect. Everybody goes blind when they move to Perfect, so they have to wear these special glasses in order to see. And Violet's dad is an ophthalmologist, and the story, well, they've been told that he's been brought here to kind of solve this problem and help people see without the glasses again. But her father goes missing, her mum starts acting weird, it's a bit Stepford Wivesy, there's that sort of vibe going on, and she finds out about these watchers who are watching everybody. So the story's nice, it is original. I did like it, but I didn't love it. So I think the writing for me wasn't quite, I don't know, I think it was just a bit, it told you a lot where it could have, no, it showed you things, it told you things where it could have shown you things. I get my show not tell mixed up here. And even for a children's book, I think particularly in children's books, you can't cut corners, which isn't to say that, I did enjoy it, but there were just lots of little things which niggled at me. Maybe it's because I've written a children's book myself and I'm looking at children's books now more critically, but, there were lots of things where, where they're telling the reader, that, Boy's face changed suddenly, he was angry. You don't necessarily need to say that, you can show that he's angry through his actions and things like that. So I thought maybe sometimes it told you a little bit too much. I thought the reason why everybody goes blind is fairly obvious from basically the first chapter. It takes Violet, the main character, about halfway through the book before she actually realises what's causing this blindness, but I think it's very obvious to the reader early on what it is, and it possibly should also be quite obvious to her. But the story is fun, it is imaginative, and there's a quote here that I wrote down where it says, "The simple fact is, a human isn't much at all when they lack imagination." And I like that because it's sort of something to do with the story, about, and not to give spoilers, but there's a really good play on words there as well throughout the book. And I'm sort of rambling now, but anyway, I gave it a 3-star rating because I liked the story, didn't love the writing. It was good, but it definitely wouldn't be up there with one of my favourite children's books ever. So moving on, try and be more coherent with the other reviews. The next book was also a more recent Waterstones Book of the Month, I think. It's Other Minds, The Octopus and the Evolution of Intelligent Life by Peter Godfrey Smith. It's a non-fiction book, and it sort of does what it says in the tin here. It's sort of looking at the evolution of intelligent life, of consciousness, of evolution, and looking at the octopus. I've only got this way through it, so I'm afraid I do like reading non-fiction books, but I think because I was reading so many good novels alongside it, because I decided to read the non-fiction book alongside the fiction, so I wasn't just reading it in isolation. And because I was so caught up with the other books I was reading, I just wanted to read them, and so I kept putting this aside. So I will go back to it. I'm going to dip in and out of it. Possibly it shouldn't be in my books that I've read this month because I haven't actually read all of it, but it's one that I'm sort of dipping in and out of. I think I'll like it when I finish reading it, but it's just there was other things capturing my attention this month. Rambling a bit again, so I haven't given that a star rating because obviously I haven't read it yet. I did read another book as well, which I can't talk about at the minute because it's going to be published in the autumn, and I can't really tell you the title of it either, but it is on my list, and I whizzed through it in basically a couple of days. It's going to be really, hopefully I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about it soon, but definitely whenever it comes out I will refer back to this video and let you know what it was. But it's a really, really good gritty story, which I'm looking forward to telling you about at another time. So that's on my list as well. After that I read Some Kind of Fairy Tale, which is a book, again, I picked up secondhand a few months ago. And yeah, it's by Graham Joyce. And I don't want to give spoilers about it because in the first chapter ends in a way that I don't want to spoil for people if you haven't read it. So if you want to hear a little bit about it, then I'm going to tell you. If you don't want to hear a little bit about it, which could possibly spoil the beginning of it, then skip forward a few minutes until I talk about the next book. But basically, if you want to hear a little bit about it, it is essentially about a girl. You see, it doesn't say very much at all on the back. It just says that it's, a story of woods and clearings, a story of folk tales and family histories. And basically what happens in the first chapter is that it's Christmas time. You've got a sort of elderly couple who are just sitting down to their Christmas dinner, and this girl turns up on the doorstep, or young woman turns up on the doorstep. The man doesn't recognise her, but when his wife comes to the door, she faints because it turns out it's their long lost daughter who's been missing for 20 years. And they also have a son who lives nearby with his family. They usually spend Christmas together, but this year they aren't for some reason. And basically, this is how the story unfolds, is that the daughter, it transpires, was taken by the fairies 20 years ago when she was in the wood near their house. And she thinks she's only been gone for 6 months. And she's come back 20 years later, is quite confused by all the changes that have happened. She still looks like quite young. She still looks about 18. And it's just a really interesting exploration of how everybody reacts to her coming back. We learn about her story throughout the book as well. Each chapter, or every few chapters, it gives you a different character's perspective, which I really like. Some books don't do that very well, but this one does it really well. And the book, I flew through it. I mean, it's so, so good. I'm going to try and see if I can find any more of his books. I really love this. And there's quite a few typos and things in it as well, which really irritated me. They really needed a proofreader, or better proofreader, but the book was so good, the story was so good, that I'll forgive them for that. So I give this one, I think, 5 stars. I'm checking my book. Yes, that's a 5-star rating. I've got my book journal here beside me so that I keep myself on track. So yeah, I found it quite eerie, magical, and sort of, it really fulfilled all the expectations that I had for it once I sort of knew where the story was going, and although I didn't know completely where it was going, but I really, really enjoyed it. So still in the fairy tale theme, I also picked up Vintage Grimm, the Complete Fairy Tales book as well. Now, this is a doorstopper of a book. There are like over 200 stories in this, about 1,000 pages long, and because they're all so many lots of different short stories, I've really been dipping in and out of it. So I did start reading, I've only read this much, which is probably about a novel length anyway, but I thought I would share it because I'm sort of picking up in between or alongside other books that I'm reading. I don't think I need to describe what the Grimm fairy tales are like. You're probably well aware, but it's really nice because there's obviously a lot of stories in it that I haven't read before. There's some I have read that I'm sort of refamiliarising myself with, and they're really fun. So I have to give this 5 stars, of course. Okay, the next book is just recently re-released, The Boy Who Belonged to the Sea by Denis Throult. Don't know if I'm saying his surname right, apologies if not. So I discovered this author well, a few months ago when I found a little book called The Peculiar Life of a Lonely Postman in my local co-op store. So I got that secondhand. I loved it, and then I wanted to get some more of his books, but then he's Canadian author, so the books are translated from French, and they're basically being republished by a UK publisher, which is One World Publications. So I had to wait until this book was reissued because you couldn't get the earlier editions. So it was just published at the beginning of April. I ordered it and I was quite intrigued by it. It's really, really good. I think this, what can I tell you about it without giving you spoilers? It's about two boys who basically become friends. The main character, I guess, his parents were involved in like a snow. They're into skiing and sort of snow sports and things like that. So they were in an accident. His father is dead. His mother is in a coma. He's living with his grandparents. He befriends a boy, or he becomes friends with a boy who lives nearby. He's a bit of a loner, a bit of an outsider. And it's sort of about a really poignant story about their friendship, about how they cope with loss. The other boy lives with quite a drunk, violent father, and his mother is gone, missing. Well, he thinks she's missing, but she's presumed dead. She disappeared into the sea whenever he was a baby. So it's really just about their stories and their imaginations, because again, don't want to give too much away, but the other boy in the story sort of creates this, he's sort of obsessed with his mother, perhaps has gone to live in the sea, that she's sort of dwelling there like almost like a mermaid, or and he wants to find her and go back to her. And there's, I hesitate to say the sort of magical, there is some sort of magical realism in it a little bit perhaps, but it's just, I read this really, really quickly as well. The writing is really, really beautiful, and it's just a really lovely story. We've got John Burnside in the back, describes it as enchanting, philosophically astute, and deeply poignant. And yeah, I give this 5-star rating. It's really, really good. As usual, my summary of it's maybe not the best, but it's just really, really lovely little story, and very, very poignant the way it ends as well. So the next book I read was Almost Love by Louise O'Neill. This was very kindly sent to me by Books Northern Ireland, and I've forgotten her name. I think it's Cherry. Sorry if that's wrong. But she very kindly, I just commented on her post and said that I was looking forward to reading Louise O'Neill because I haven't read any of her books yet, and she asked me if I wanted to read it and said she would send it to me, and she did. So thank you very much for that. I read this quite quickly in a couple of days, but part of that was because, and I hate to say this because it was a book that was sent to me as a gift, but part of the reason why I read it so quickly was because I just wanted to finish it and I wanted to find out what happened. This is the first Louise O'Neill book that I read, and I didn't love it. I mean, I'm giving it a 2-star rating. So really, I've heard a lot about Louise O'Neill's books, and I've heard a lot of good things about her, so I really wanted to read it because of that. But if she hadn't written the story, I probably wouldn't have picked this book up, because it's not really the sort of thing that I usually read. It's really about a woman's relationship, about a previous relationship she had, or where she wasn't really treated very well, and she's in a different relationship now, and it's sort of really to do with her reflecting on what she wanted out of the relationship before, which wasn't perfect, but she really wanted it to be, and how she the repercussions of that in her current relationship, which started off as being really good and is now sort of going downhill. So I don't know, it wasn't for me. If I don't like the story, then if the writing is beautiful, that sort of makes up for it sometimes, but I didn't love the story, I didn't love the writing, and it just really wasn't for me. It's not because the character is unlikable, because she is unlikable, but that's just not why. It just didn't grip me. I just didn't really, want to keep reading about her relationship and her past relationship, and it wasn't very interesting for me, I'm afraid. So I have pre-ordered Louise O'Neill's next book, which is actually a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid, partly because of the cover, because it looks beautiful, so you have to look that up. I can't even remember what it's called, but so I'm hoping it might be different, because the story might be more up my street. But anyway, I'm afraid for me this just didn't really work out. It doesn't really, yeah, just wasn't for me. So if you like this, let me know. But if you didn't like it, let me know. So yeah, there was a little bit of a disappointment there because I've heard a lot of things about Louise O'Neill, so I was looking forward to it a lot. Now, the next book I read was a young adult novel called Even the Darkest Stars by Heather Fawcett. This is the first book in a duology. I think the second book is out soon, which is great because I loved this book. Give it a 5-star rating, of course. This is actually a book that I got in a FairyLoot book box a few months ago. If you don't know what FairyLoot is, well, I'll try and remember to leave a link down below. If I don't, then just Google FairyLoot. It's one of these subscription boxes that you get every month. The FairyLoot gives you get a free, or not free because you pay for it, you get a hardback, newly published hardback young adult fantasy fiction book, as well as sort of different assortment of bookish goodies as well, and usually there's some sort of theme to the box. So yeah, I just hadn't read a young adult book for quite a while, and this one sounded intriguing because it is basically set up in the mountains. It's about explorers. So this girl is basically goes off to on an exploration, sort of a big expedition up the mountains with the royal explorer who's been asked by the emperor to find a sort of, well, some sort of artifact. She doesn't know what he's been asked to find, but basically it transpires that he's going to find this lost sky city at the top of a really perilous mountain which nobody's ever climbed before. I think there was an expedition once before that her mother led, but nobody returned from that, basically. So the main character is called Kamsin. I really like this book, and I know I've actually just jumped into there and I'm not explaining it very well. So I'll read you the bit from the blurb, it's probably better. So Kamsin had always dreamed of becoming one of the Emperor's royal explorers, the elite climbers tasked with mapping the wintry mountainous empire and spying on its enemies. She knows she could be the best in the world if only someone would give her a chance. But everything changes when the mysterious and eccentric River Shara, the greatest explorer ever known, arrives in her village and demands to hire Kamsin, not her older sister Lucia, as everyone expected, for his next expedition. So this is Kamsin's chance to prove herself, even though River's mission to retrieve a rare talisman for the Emperor means climbing Raksha, the tallest and deadliest mountain in the Aryas. Lucia sets off then on her own mission to Raksha with a rival explorer, and Kamsin must decide what's most important to her, protecting her sister from the countless perils of the climb or beating her to the summit. The challenges of climbing Raksha are unlike anything Kamsin expected or prepared for, with avalanches, ice chasms, ghosts, and other dangers at every turn. And as dark secrets are revealed, Kamsin must unravel the truth about their mission and her companions while surviving the deadliest climb she has ever faced. And because it's with FairyLoot, I also got a letter from the author, and I have a sort of signed book plate as well. So I really liked it because I've read a lot of young adult fantasy fiction last year, some of which were really good, some really weren't, and I sort of tired a little bit of it because there's always a schmaltzy love triangle. Sometimes they're quite predictable, and I thought this sounded a bit more original, and I wasn't disappointed. There were inklings of a bit of a love triangle thing, but it all petered out quite quickly, which was good, and the focus was really on the exploring and the climbing and the really harsh conditions of the mountains. And the magic and the ghosts and things like that which happened, which appeared throughout the story, and it was just different, and I really enjoyed it. I read this really quickly, and it's quite a thick book. Again, I read this probably in a couple of days, and I would be excited to read the second book because I'm interested to see where it's going. So yeah, it gets 5 stars from me. I think it's more original than some books, and it does everything that you would like, I think, in a fantasy book. It's got exploring, it's got witches, it's got ghosts. It's got magic and all sorts of stuff in it, so I really liked that book. Now, the last book that I read in April is also what I'm going to name as my book of the month. So it is, now I'm a little bit late in reading this, I'm aware that most people have probably already read it a few years ago when it came out, but it's When God Was a Rabbit by Sarah Winman. So again, I got this in secondhand bookshop recently. It's a book that whenever it was published, it was all over the show. I saw it all the time, and I just never picked it up. And so because I've heard great things about it, but never knew what the story was about, I thought I would get it and give it a go. So all it says in the back is that this is a book about a brother and a sister. It's a book about childhood and growing up, friendships and families, triumph and tragedy, and everything in between. More than anything, it's a book about love in all its forms. So, yeah, another sort of intriguing blurb, which doesn't really tell you anything about what to expect in the book, but I really loved it. I whizzed through this so quickly. The writing is beautiful. The story is so compelling. I mean, it's hilarious. You're laughing a lot. You're laughing at something one minute because it's so comical and so funny and so sort of real. And then the next minute you're being hit with some really quite horrific things which happen. Quite early on. I don't think it's a spoiler. It might be. So if you don't like spoilers in any shape or form, possibly don't listen to the next couple of seconds. But there's references to abuse, child abuse in the book. There are some kind of dark things that go on, within it, but I don't know how best to describe it. It's, it is just about the brother and the sister and their relationship, which is really, really close, and just about, it's how they progress through their lives, and the things that happen to them. And this is such a vague summary. I'm not really selling this book, and I really want to because it's so good. If you've read it, you'll understand. And there are certain real life events which, it starts off in the 60s when the main character is born. And then basically takes you up to the 90s and the early 2000s. There's certain real life events that happened around that time which are mentioned in the book, which I wasn't expecting, but whenever I knew the time period that we were sort of getting up to, I thought, I wonder, is this going to come into play? And it did, not quite in the way that I was expecting. It was handled really, really well. I don't really want to mention what the events are in case it puts people off, and I think if it had been in the blurb on the back of the book, it might have put me off. But there's some really quite sad, poignant moments, but again, it's just really quite funny, and I just really would recommend that you pick up this book if you haven't read it. I'm actually reading at the moment, which I shouldn't show you, but it's going to be my May wrap-up. I'm reading her second book, A Year of Marvellous Ways, as well, and I've also just bought Tin Man, which is her most recent novel, which I'm looking forward to getting to, and I might even read next because I really think Sarah Winman is one of my new favourite authors. So what else can I tell you about this book? I feel like I want to tell you more, but I don't really want to tell you because I don't want to spoil it for you. Maybe I'll just leave it there because this video is probably quite long and I've gone through a lot of books. And I should have thought about this a bit better, about what I was going to say about this one, because I really wanted to tell you how great it is. But yeah, the writing is beautiful, the story is lovely. It's just, the narrator is just really, I think one of these, the quotes in the back says it's beguiling, you can't quite get the voice out of your head. And I think it's just because it's really authentic, and it's really, you can imagine yourself, if you've got siblings especially, you can see yourself in parts of the book, and it's just really heartwarming in some ways and really hard-hitting in other ways. And it'll just sort of take you through the highs and lows of all the different emotions, all the different things that happen in life as things do. I really recommend that you read that. So that's my April wrap-up complete. I've got 10 books listed. I've read 10 books. Technically, I suppose it was only 9 books because I haven't quite finished the Octopus Evolution book. And I'm sort of dipping in and out of the Grimm's fairy tales. But most of the books I read this month were really, really, really good, and that's probably why I read so many, because I really whizzed through a few of them. Looking forward to seeing what books I'm going to read in May. If you have any book recommendations for me, then let me know. If there's any books you've read recently that you really enjoyed, feel free to share that in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, which is probably quite long by now, and I will see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.